Hey guys, Miss Osuna here. Let's do lace with markers. So last time we met, we were working on our lingerie. We already did the skin tone and we already did the mesh right in the center with the diagonal cutout. So now let's continue from there. So we're gonna darken our skin tone, and this is literally from the shadow side, so that's the left side. Your lightest color first, and we are darkening the legs on the leg opening, and we are darkening on the left side of that actual entire sketch. So notice, always start on the left. That's where the shadow side is, and that's for our purposes of our classes. You can light things very differently, but we're doing left side shadow, right side is going to be the light source. Also, we're doing the arm, so we're just going in and adding layer after layer until we get it as dark as we want. This particular color is called Beach. And again, whatever colors you use, just make sure that they all blend together nicely. So this is the lightest color, and then we'll move on from there to the medium and then to the darkest color last. I always try to make sure that the cleavage for lingerie is really prominent, and I definitely want to make sure in this sketch that you are prepared with your tin, because at a later point we're going to spread our markers, and you'll see once we get there. Okay, now we're moving on to darken with our lightest colored pencil. And once again, this is picking up from our last class, and again, starting on the shadow side, just to pull out that real big contrast, because that's what you want when you're doing lingerie. The skin tone needs to pop. So even though this is a fairly light skin tone, we still need that nice contrast where it's darkest on the edges and on the shadow side, and lighter in the center and lightest on the light source side. In our case, that's the right. And now we're going to move on to our lightest color for our gray. We're going to touch up that mesh. And we started this in class, but now we're going to add to it. Again, start on that shadow side, adding the lightest gray to that mesh, because this is going to be black. And so we start with grays and we get darker and darker until it ultimately looks black. But we want to see that skin tone through it. That's why we had to do the skin tone first. So this is our mesh cutout, starting with that light gray. Now we're going to move on to color number 2 for our skin tone, and you'll see we'll go back and forth with this. So the medium tone, in my case it's called Soft Sun, and we're adding more to it. So the layering is how you get that depth of that skin tone, and that's really important for that final result. This is true if you're layering with watercolor or markers. You definitely need to use a blow dryer though, or some source of a dryer to make it dry if you're doing this on watercolor. But each time you go across your page, you want to make sure it gets darker and darker. Now I'm just going to draw with frown shapes the edges of our panty, and this is just a little semicircle, kind of frowning downward, and that gives the edge of our panty, and that's with mechanical pencil. And of course, depends on what your lace looks like, what your edges are going to look like as well. Okay, now I'm filling in with a light gray. It's the lightest of my grays. And I'm starting on the leg opening area on the shadow side, and I'm going to start to work my way over towards the lighter side. This is the first layer. Once again, I do gray very, very lightly, and then it gets darker and darker, and it'll appear to be black. Now here I am with the fine liner, and I'm pulling out these details very, very carefully. So I'm going down the leg opening on the shadow side first, which is our left side in our class. And I just want to make sure that these details are locked into place. So I'm taking my time. Yeah, I also recommend here that you can also put a piece of paper under your hand if you feel like some of the oils naturally from your hand are going to get into the page that you're working on, because you want to keep this super, super clean. And I typically do have some type of a paper nearby so that I feel like if I need to, I can just reach out, grab it, put it under my hand, and that will help to keep the work that I'm doing nice and clean. So I'm just outlining here the leg openings and the bikini bottoms for our panty with this fine liner, but I did start on the shadow side. Try to develop that habit consistently. This way you do the same thing each time. Now I'm going to pull out the edges of our mesh cutouts, And these edges are going to ultimately end up being super, super dark. So that's why in this case I'm creating what feels like an outline, because the edges literally are going to be thicker of our leg opening and our waist for our panty. And you will see when you look at lingerie, you'll see that detail quite a bit. Now moving on for skin tone underneath our garter and our stockings. So these are thigh-high stockings, and starting always on the shadow side, lightest color. We're going to continue filling this in. Even though the stockings are going to be black and they're going to be on top of the skin, we want the skin tone to actually be there first so that you get that layered effect, because that's what happens in real life. Now I'm just darkening that skin tone on these thigh-high stocking areas, starting on the shadow side with the marker number 2. Try to keep the center a little bit white so that you can have that pop of contrast. Now I'm gradually going to add to that pop with my colored pencil. And again, that's on the shadow side just to pull out that edge and define it very well. Now let's get back to the panty with our marker. And this is that gray marker. And once again, it's really important to add little details at a time. So now I'm actually starting to fill in the shape of our lace pattern, just very lightly. And I have the lightest color marker that I'm using. This filling in is just based on the lace that I happen to have, but of course base it on your lace, whatever floral you happen to have. So you just want to look at it and create the outer edges as those shapes appear. Maybe it's a floral, so that would be kind of a frown and a smile on the outer edges. Maybe it's very linear, so it just depends on what you happen to have. And now it's time to darken. That same idea of filling in whatever lace pattern you happen to have, but this is marker number 2 for my lace. And again, I'm using grays. As they're going to get darker, they're going to appear black. So this is my second color right on top of that first color for my gray. The first gray was lighter, this one is darker. And then of course my last colors of gray are going to be even darker gray, and then I'm going to add black. Now I'm switching over to my fine liner and I'm pulling out details from those edges to make them nice and dark. So the marker is thicker and it shows the basic shapes, but now the fine liner defines those shapes. Okay, I'm switching back and forth here, and now I'm leaving that fine liner and moving on to the marker, and we're going to continue back and forth in this process so that you can get that level of depth that you want. Each layer, I'm creating the edges of the actual lace in a way that make them pop out even more. I'm just touching them very lightly, but as I move forward, they start to appear more and more. And now it's time to move on to the white gel pen. That white gel pen is super helpful to pull out details in the center of your floral on your lace, sometimes even just dots. So that helps to add to that contrast and depth. Now I'm back to the black fine liner, and I'm repeating that process to pull out those details even more. And now for the details on the actual garter straps, because she's wearing what's called a Merry Widow, as we've discussed in class previously. And so with my black fine liner, I am pulling out the garter portion. Be nice and gentle, go slowly and then add. That's the only way you can really capture your lace. Very, very slow at first and just add as you go. And now it's time to move on to the actual thigh-high stockings that she's wearing with the garter. So the garter attaches to the thigh-high stockings, and we're just going to grab our black at this point, and we're going to put that black right on top of our skin tone there for the stockings. So I'm just going left, right as far as the motion, always starting on the shadow side. Of course, notice here that I'm barely touching with the pen, and I want to make sure that the center feels a bit whiter or lighter, and the edges are going to feel darker. Of course, my left side feels much darker than the far right, and that again just helps to add to the reality of the sketch. Okay, so now here I'm just going to switch back over to my mechanical pencil and I'm going to pull out a bit more detail here for our leg opening. And this gives like a scalloped edge feel, but again, it depends on what you happen to be looking at as far as your lace. I always start in pencil and then I darken with pen. So now I'm going to move to my white color pencil, and in the center once again I'm just going to soften that black so that it just feels lighter. That light reflecting in the middle does help. Now we're going to move on and add that lightest color to our Merry Widow. That's that. Kind of looks like a bustier, but it attaches with the garters. So we need to have the skin tone underneath at first, because then when we put the Merry Widow design, we'll be able to see the layering of that on top of our skin. So I'm doing my lightest marker, and then we will move on from there. Okay, moving on to marker number 2 on underneath that Merry Widow. So that is starting on the shadow side, nice and light and soft, and we're just filling in the skin with marker number 2. And now I'm going to use fine liner to pull out the details of our Merry Widow. It's that bustier that has garters that attach to the stockings and it's worn over a panty. So I'm just designing the actual lines here with the fine liner. So on these outer edges of the lines where I have boning, possibly where there might be extra stitching, it's extra thick. That's where I am working right now. Now that I've used my fine liner to pull out some of those details under the bust and at the princess seam, I'm going to fill that in with my lightest color gray marker. And here I'm using the lightest color gray marker now to start actually filling in the fabric portion, which is going to be somewhat see-through to cover up the bust. So you always put your details of the Merry Widow or whatever lingerie item you're using first, and then fill in around that area. All right, now I'm going to spread my markers. So here I have my tin. It's just a cookie container. You can spread it on anything plastic or shiny. This is my lightest gray color, and I'm going to scribble it basically on the surface of this tin. And then I'm going to switch over to my colorless blender so that I can pick up this light gray with the blender. And I'm going to start coloring with that blender and that very light gray. I'm using the brush tip side, and as I pick it up, now I can start to get a nice gradient, so it becomes not totally see-through. Very light dark color. I'm going to do that over and over again until I am able to fill in this torso area. Very lightly at first, and then we'll go darker and darker. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to go back in with my fine liner and pull out some more details. All right, so now I have my medium color, and this is a medium gray. I'm going to spread that one onto the actual tin, and then I'm going to switch to my blender and start to pick that color up. So now I'm just filling in with that medium gray. It's darker than the first, and I'm starting to add more and more depth. Per side, always start on the shadow side. Now it's time to blend with the next color marker, and that one is my medium gray, and I'm just going to add layer after layer right on top of what I already have happening. You want to do this process until you get it as dark as you personally want, but you still want to be able to see the skin tone through. All right, so now that we've done that, it's time to pull out some more detail. So I'm going to switch over to my mechanical pencil and I'm going to draw in the detail of my lace very carefully and very gently. You can try to be symmetrical, but you don't have to worry too much about that because this is a fashion sketch. So the idea of the lace is enough. You don't have to be super, super exact with the symmetry. All right, so now that I've done that, I like the outcome, but it's going to be time now to switch to an even finer liner. So this one is even thinner. It's nice to have two different thicknesses of your fine liner. So this one will add another level of dimension because it's thinner than the first one that I was using. And here I'm going to go back to that thicker fine liner and just add a bit more detail. And once again, I am back in with the mechanical pencil to pull out more detail. So just go back and forth until you capture the detail you're after. Okay, so now that I have my details in place, I'm moving to my black marker. And I'm going to thicken all the lines that I really want to jump out. As I thicken near the stocking, I don't want to get rid of the center. I do want that white kind of gray feeling in the center, just to show the light reflecting in the middle. It's the same thing I left in the center of her legs, and etc. And this is more fine liner, just going back and forth, pulling out more detail. Now I'm going to add in some dark gray colored pencil. This is fairly dark, and it's just going to add more shadow on the shadow side. And for effect, I'm adding in more dark brown. And again, that's adding more of our layering so that it can pop. You always want to mix multiple colors to make one color. Now that I can see the detail on the Merry Widow and the panty and the stocking, I'm going to go in and add some pop to the actual skin tone. And this is with my peach colored pencil that matches my lightest skin tone. But it does add the ability to see through that lace to the skin. Here's a bit more brown, especially for the cleavage, because again, when you do lingerie, it's important that the cleavage shows very well. Here's a trick. I always try to add a little bit of a purple or an eggplant color very softly to the skin. It just warms it up. And that's for ivory and light skin tones and even tans. Bit more of our peach and then white gel pen. And that's important just to keep all your details in place. Here's a bit more brown colored pencil, but notice it's super soft, but it does help to add to the final effect. This is now more white. And if you even just add a tiny little bit as far as dots here and there, it does help to pop. And then I'm back in with the brown But notice it's not taking over the sketch. Again, this is just soft blending with different colors so that when you look at it, it has a real depth of real skin. And now I'm back to the peach just to blend a tiny bit more. A bit more brown colored pencil, and this is all on top of the marker just to add to the layering effect. You're just going to keep going back and forth until you get the color that you want. And here's a little bit more peach colored pencil. And now finally the black colored pencil. You want to be very careful though, because you don't want to take over your work. You want to keep that nice amount of detail and just add to your edges and your seams. This is the black Copic marker brush tip, and I'm just pulling out some more of these details. But notice, even though it's a black Merry Widow, it literally was created with several layers of different colors. Okay, we're just going to darken the skin tone even more. Go back and forth in this process a lot because this really does help. So back to your first color marker and you're just pulling out those details. I'm being very careful to pull out the details in the neck area, the collarbone, etc. I'll do it for this time around. I can't wait to see what Mary Widow you come up with, and I can't wait to see your skin just pop with that lingerie on top. So until we meet again in the next video, happy sketching.